These are wheels, all right? And anyone who screams at the top of our lungs that Rep wheels are bad and Volks are the only things you should be buying are terribly difficult to be around as human beings, like drifters who think you must start with a 150 horsepower car for 10 years before you can actually get something with power, or stance car owners that are just generally insufferable on the internet. There's so much about replica wheels that people just don't understand, which is why we're here. Hello, I'm Alex Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram, and just like our previous tire iceberg video where we told you everything about tire manufacturing, we're talking about rep wheels and what might be the most controversial topic for car enthusiasts on the internet. I want to get into this, and I want you to stay for the whole thing because I think it's pretty important to understand the entire subject here. Now, the first thing to understand is that replica wheels, unfortunately, or fortunately, are everywhere. I want to get the basics out of the way. Nearly every brand you think as an original has a replica wheel. For every work equipped design, there's the Work Seeker GX that looks exactly like a 1552 Tarmac TR. For every Volk Racing making the TE37, there's the mid wheels line from Rays called the R26, which is just an Enkei RPF1 rep. Most of these bigger brands host a sea of similar brands in their pocket, just like for tires. Now, for Rays, you have brands like Volk Racing, Mid Wheels, A-Lap, Graham Lights, Versus, VMF, Homura. For MV Forged, you have AL13, you have Brada and ESR wheels. On the factory side of things, you have a company called YHA International. They make wheels for Advanti Racing, Enkei, Brayton, OZ, Sparco, Koenig, Mickey Thompson. ATD makes their own wheels, and they're a tire distribution company. All of this to say, the more successful the wheel brand, the higher chance they have multiple lines to diversify their expensive wheels to their mid-tier wheels and then their cheap wheels. And sometimes their design inspiration. Try to think of replica designs and wheel quality though as being independent from each other. Similar, not the same. They can be close, and it might be easier for us to just loop them all together, but in this conversation, we're gonna try and separate them. But what is a replica wheel? Linus Tech Tips, that's a great question. A rep wheel is simple. It is a design that has greater than 80% of its key features paired with an already existing design. This is a wheel design that's been utilized in motorsport and or has heritage and use across the globe. Wait, Alex, where did you get that explanation? We made it, all right? It pissed off manufacturers and Reddit alike a little bit, but it's true. The best way to sort out rep wheels is to define it, which is exactly what we did. It's also why we started Martini Works, because you know how exhausting it is to not being able to tell people, normal everyday enthusiasts, the truth about wheel design or quality or pushing things that are proper versus just what makes margin. It's brutal, okay? And how we decide if a wheel is actually a replica design is we look at things like spoke design, hub bore, tapering, and more. And it's pretty easy to see where design could be copied from. But what about the ones that are like kind of? They kind of look like a rep, but they kind of don't. Like they're in the middle. We call those an inspired by design. Now, those are defined as a wheel that shares 40 to 80% of its key features with an already existing wheel design. But this is a wheel design that has been utilized in motorsport or is greater than 10 years old and is no longer in production or supported by the original manufacturer. We use elements like the fact that the original wheel isn't made anymore. We talk about how if this new wheel is present in active motorsports, if this new wheel hosts manufacturing qualities necessary for global sales, things like JWL and VIA, the real thing, not the fake thing. And the wheel features sizes that aren't available in the original wheel production. And I mentioned the whole thing about if the company's still in business because if a company existed in the 90s and they no longer are making wheels anymore, gets gone, and then a new company comes in 2025 and they make a design that's kind of similar but not the same and comes in new sizes, the original wheel company can't get credit for that design forever. A good example is when Regamaster did this. When the K&P came out and it was massively successful, the Regamaster came back. And finally, we have an original wheel design. That's the one that you think is the most expensive out of all of them. It's a design that features less than 40% of its key features with an already existing wheel design. It's a wheel design that's been utilized in motorsport and is not in production by any preceding manufacturer. Key elements for this are that the wheel is commonly accepted as the first of its kind in the market. Number 2, the wheel must meet safety requirements for motorsport use, including physical VIA testing, and the TUV testing is strongly recommended. And the wheel design must be available in multi-mold configurations. With those 3 definitions, we can pretty clearly see what wheels belong where. And why we did that is because we tried to break up the conversation about if a wheel is a replica design, does that make it bad? The answer to that is no. From a technology and foundation perspective, those two aren't solely related. But we still needed to find a way to share with you if a wheel is a design ripoff of another wheel. And this definition allows us to do that. So when did replica wheels get popular? I'd say a moment the second wheel was made. All right, there are a ton of myths around wheel manufacturing reps. But to be honest, it started all the way back in 1963. With the wheel called the American Racing Torque Thrust. It's a 5-spoke wheel. It became an iconic design pretty much of the 60s. And it was so explosive in 60s modification culture, specifically in California, through the rising frame of lowriders and the Chicano car culture, that it would actually make its way to Japan. And it would inspire millions of younger Japanese who were still finding individualism through the rise of Bosozoku culture, that they wanted to do things like Americans did. Versions of the American Torque Thrust wheel were copied in Japan and sold for Datsuns and Mazdas and Hondas. And when the 70s came into the world, cars like the Mini and the MG and Porsches and Mustangs started running a brand called Mini Lights, a wheel brand that was founded in England out of an old can wheel factory. But people found a lot of inspiration from Europe as well, because about 10 years later, that wheel design would launch exclusively in Japan and would be commonly known as, hold on, I'll show you. This brand is commonly considered an original wheel design manufacturer because it's expensive and it's old. This is an RS Watanabe, an RS8. But this wheel design is actually a replica design of a brand called Mini Light from Europe. But nobody really remembers that all the way back in the 70s. Why? Because the internet wasn't really a thing. And when the 240Z was designed and marketed and they had a wheel on the car, they did not have a Mini Light on the car. They had an RS Watanabe on the car. All right, sorry, I had to share this with you. It's very important. That's essentially what RS Watanabe became known as in Japan, even though there was an original design that was made in Europe. Replica wheels weren't founded due to budget, at least in the beginning. They were founded because of the lack of availability and just straight up knowledge. Like, the issue of getting a wheel from America to Japan or Europe to America wasn't cost effective in the 70s and 80s, and wasn't really even possible due to shopping restrictions 50 years ago because of tariffs and import-export laws. So folks started making their own wheels. The result was brands across the globe making similar wheels that were replicas of others. But with no internet to regurgitate the malice you see now in 2025, the world just kind of kept spinning. So are replica wheels bad? Well, rep wheels in the past aren't quite like the replica wheels made today. In the 1960s and 70s, there were only so many ways that you could make a wheel, typically with a gravity cast mold, where the metal quality determined 99% of the quality of the wheel that you ended up with. It wouldn't really be until the early 80s that we'd see forged wheel manufacturing get popular, and the 2010s when rotary forging made stronger wheels even more affordable to people like us. But as incognito windows got used more than hustler magazines, the amount of knowledge globally around car culture grew like crazy, and brands that hid behind the ocean swells started getting interest from folks that love butter, aka Americans, and costs of imports came down and purchasing became easier through international distribution. Pair that with the surge of 70s tuner car success from Japan, and you saw folks that didn't want a Camaro for their fun car, they wanted a Datsun, and Datsuns weren't styled with Mini Lights like I just said. They were designed with RS Watanabes on the car, so they didn't buy Mini Lights from Europe, they bought RS Watanabes from Japan. Fast forward to the 2000s, and the era of tuner cars and Euro cars grew like mad in the US, and the demand to want something that seemed authentic meant that anything that didn't come from those countries was unauthentic. But while folks wanted the real BBS or the real American Torque Thrust, there were brands that offered the same thing at a fraction of the price. The similarities on its head were a wheel that looked the same but was easier and cheaper to get. It was that made replica wheels as popular as they are now. There's a common misconception that fake wheels and rep wheels are the same. They're not. A wheel that's trying to look like another wheel with stamps and logos to make it look like that wheel is a fake wheel. What makes rep wheels bad? Now, there's a common misconception that fake wheels and rep wheels are the same thing. They're not. A wheel that's trying to look like another wheel with stamps and logos of that original wheel, that's a fake wheel. An example would be a brand called 885 Wheels pretending to be BBS. That's a fake wheel. A Vors LTO1 is a replica because it's branded Vors, but it looks like an Enkei RPF1. But what's the difference between a Vors LTO1 and an Enkei RPF1? Well, quite a bit. The Enkei was manufactured off the back of real McLaren Formula One testing, and the design was built off the understanding of radial fatigue, heat dissipation, and spoke tensile strength. This took hundreds of thousands of dollars and years to develop. The Vors LTO1 was built to look like the popular design, and that's about it. So what can make a replica design bad is two things. Did the replica brand understand the inherent purpose of the original wheel design? And number two, was the wheel manufactured in a similar way to the original to maintain its functional properties? Those two things are a lot of the reason people are standoffish to a replica designed wheel. Because without proper R&D, testing, and validation, any wheel is truly only as good as the load rating that they're built with. And certain wheels, especially high performance ones, were built with very specific intentions. Where a lightweight RPF1 might be possible to absorb more impact because of its design, a Vors may not because the brand didn't understand the metal, spoke bend, lip strength, or load rating for its wheel. And what you get is a wheel that looks similar but won't perform the same. The difference in performance is the savings you pay at checkout, and that savings is what equals performance. Now, we offer Vors on our website. It's actually one of the only entry-level wheel brands that we offer. And the reason that we're so open about that is because we want people to know. At the end of the day, the choice is up to you, and we'll support what you choose. But our goal is to educate so that nobody ever feels like they have a marketing thing pulled over their eyes and they think they're buying something that they're not. So don't hear me say anything bad, because sometimes people are only looking to save money, and maybe they're investing it into tires. You shouldn't feel bad about this information. I just want you to know it. So when is a wheel too expensive? It's such a pain because wheel design is the only real way to visually see a difference in performance. That's why companies have started adding bead knurling onto their wheels. Like, does a 200 horsepower car need it? No, but it's something that at least looks different. You know what I mean? Like, if Kosei makes their wheels in Thailand and India, does it make it better or worse than a Stage Knight that has their wheels made in Taiwan? Like, what if the original is made in a worse way? Wheels being too expensive is entirely subjective. Some people won't spend $1,000. Others will drop 10 G's. Fundamentally, wheels are either made by number one, gravity cast, it's the cheapest and the heaviest, or low pressure cast. It's slightly more money, but it's a bit lighter. The flow form got really popular in the 2010s, and that's a cast faced with forged-like properties in its barrel, making it stronger and mid-priced. Then you have forged, which is expensive because it's a single piece of aluminum that's forged into its shape. Then you have the multi-piece forged assembly, where all the components make a final wheel, and typically all of those bits are forged aluminum. I'd say wheels start to get expensive when a brand hasn't earned the price it sells for. Buying a $3,000 set of TE37s makes sense to some. It's symmetrical, it's a wheel with heritage, it's got purpose, intention, and race pedigree. A no-name brand doing the same thing and selling them for $5K but relying on factory experience versus their own racing experience might seem silly. And a lot of times, those wheels aren't tested. But your reasoning might be different. For me personally, and the way that we built Martini works, is that we want you to make sure that the dollar that you are spending goes as far as it possibly can, up and to a point. Which is why a lot of times people will say, so that's why that random brand breaks, because they're just trying to make a bunch of money and they don't make good wheels. I want to tell you the truth about wheels. The truth is, all wheels break. The truth about wheels is that they all break. They all shatter, they all bend. You throw any wheel sideways into a dirt drop and you'd be shocked when everything shatters or bends, okay? My first day at Ibisu, I saw a 57 CR explode at the entry of North Course. A few hours later, a bent BBS came floating through the pits on an S13 because they went off into the hill at the school course. These are both notable brands and both of them had issues. Nothing is abstained from bending or breaking. Please, throw enough force at a wheel and it will bend or break. Designs done right can help minimize this, but it doesn't make them, like bulletproof. It just makes them stronger. Where it matters most with wheels is three things. How is it manufactured and tested? Does it meet your intended need? And the third one, and probably the most important, do you like it? For number one, that's where people who use their wheels need to focus on the most. An Alibaba ripoff of an Apex forged wheel just isn't the same. The spoke depth isn't the same. The barrel design isn't the same. The aluminum blank they used to forge the wheel isn't the same weight. And the testing isn't the same. Do they look similar? Hell yeah. But are they the same wheel?
Hell no!
Are Apex forged replica designs of BBS? Some are, absolutely. Does that make Apex wheels bad functionally? No. Apex wheels test and do what's needed to make a properly good wheel, even if the design is replicated. And the same thing could be said for Koenig on the Flowform side. Sure, they can bend and break, but Koenig wheels are tested and derived using real R&D from racing to make the best wheels they can within a budget. And for anyone that thinks that JWL, VIA, and TUV testing is just a form submission thing, that's not true at all. Real JWL, VIA, and TUV testing is a whole process, and putting the wheel through JWL and VIA is tough, but honestly, it's not audited, which is why you see that stamped on cheap wheels, even though they probably have never been JWL or VIA stamped or tested. Number two, does it meet your intended need? If your goal is to show off your wheels and you value the heritage and passion of a wheel brand, then you're damn right that you'd want to aim for something originally designed if you can, and if that matters to you. Maybe it doesn't, and that's all right too. Wheel originality isn't a huge deal when functionality comes to the field. What matters is if the wheel will handle wheel-to-wheel racing for those people, and that's important. But number three, and I think a lot of people forget, is do you like it? Wheels are style, and showcasing your style is a big deal. Don't be a sheep and get TEs if you think they look basic and they're overplayed for a street car if you like Koenig forged more. You'll save money. You'll only use 30% of the tech anyway on the street, and you'll still be a happy camper. So why do rep wheels upset people? Rep wheels annoy people for a few reasons, I think, and sometimes even me too, as a guy that's pretty typically open about all types of builds. Number one, blatant ripoffs can just feel icky. If someone is passing off their wheel to look like something else, I think it can be perceived wrong, especially in the show scene. It's why GMR gets so much crap. If the wheels are untested BBS copies with no JWL and VIA or TUV true testing, then the wheel is only as good as it looks. But if the look is a ripoff of another design, then what really are you left with? The savings. Number two, replica design wheels without testing or R&D on the track can be dangerous, and often the difference between a wheel bending or snapping is the difference in that testing. Low pressure gravity cast wheels do break at spoke level, and that can be scary as hell if that happens to you. Typically speaking, higher quality wheels that are more expensive or originally designed have worked through the necessary tech to prevent that from happening most of the time. And thirdly, and probably the most shallow way people look at this, is because they like to gatekeep. It's why I don't have anything against people building their car however they want, but I don't think people should build their car off Alibaba thinking a fake wheel that's forged is the same thing as an Advan GT, because they just aren't. And trying to imitate that or copy that feels weird. People's infatuation with trying to speedrun the car building journey is just astonishing to me. Nobody wants to build an affordable, fun car anymore. Everybody wants to build it as fast as they can. They want to have the cheapest, coolest, but fastest, most best looking, most unique build that looks the most expensive, but it's just weird. Replica wheels are a needed part of the industry because when done right, they offer affordable wheels that are from notable brands that have proper testing and warranty at a fraction of the cost of the real thing. But to assume replica wheels are the same as the OG isn't fair to the OG, objective or not. And that does also mean that sometimes the OG is worse. But what you want to keep in mind is that knowing that and having an opinion on this whole thing means having to do your research a little bit and having to know enough about the wheel industry to understand where you kind of have to be okay with reps and where you kind of don't. Replica designed wheels are not inherently good or bad, just the same way that originally designed wheels aren't inherently good or bad. But speed running the journey of building your car by trying to buy something to look like something it's not feels weird. And there really should be nothing wrong with buying something within your budget. And if you enjoy something for how it looks and you just want your car to look a certain way, then go at it. Buy whatever the you want. Modify it however you want. But if you're gonna have an opinion on this whole world of having wheel designs, I think it's important that you understand all the fun information that I shared with you today. With that being said, let me know what your thoughts are on replica wheels. And of course, if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, wheel and tire packages, or you're looking to understand a little bit more, you can head out to martiniworks.com. We want you to mod your car with your friends. It's how we're able to continue growing this incredible journey of helping people mod their car the right way. With that being said, I'm Alex, Alex Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram. Really enjoyed talking about this one. We'll see you on the next one.